Okay, I think we're live. I think we're live. We're live on the internet.
We're live.
Broadcasting to millions and billions and trillions of people. I'm Alan Levine from the NetSmart studios in Strawberry, Arizona, and we're just so excited to have the session with a few of the Rheingolds to talk about all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mia to say hello, and then we'll call on everybody else to do some self-intros.
So hi, everyone. I'm Mia Zamora. For our network narrative fans, you're pretty used to me by now, but everyone knows that I'm half of the equation of this network narrative journey that we're on. And I teach both literature and writing at Kane University. And I can pass the baton on to my friend over here next.
Hello, I am Jude Morgan. I participate in the NetSmart class. I'm a young alchemist, and I happen to be the professor's daughter. I mean, son. Son. Cut that out. Cut it.
Oh, cool.
We know who you are. It's really been really exciting to have Jude as part of the class because he's doing all the stuff. He's in the class with the Kane students. He's blogging, and he brings some really interesting perspectives to what we're doing. We're going to do our guests last, so I'm going to call on my friend Sandy Jensen Brown until she starts speaking from Oregon.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Howard. I'm so excited to meet you. You're a person of my own generation. I want to say that I love how you dress. You have a phenomenal wardrobe. I love your psychedelic art. I come to you from Eugene, Oregon. So I recognize you as a merry prankster, I'm quite sure. I lived for 20 years in an intentional community. I have written for Communities Magazine and for Communal Society Journal. My master's thesis was in The Poet as Shaman. And I heard your wackadoodle title of your master's thesis up at Reed College. And I said, we are soul brother and sister. So I am just so thrilled to meet you.
And Sandy's been an open participant in DS-106, and she follows me a lot. But she's wonderful. She's fantastic, and she's a storyteller. And next, say hello to our friend Kevin Hodgins, who is off of school today. We're so excited your schedule allowed it, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Kevin Hodgson, and I'm out in Western Massachusetts. I teach 6th grade. And I'm part of the Western Massachusetts Writing Project as well. And I like to see myself as a writer and a musician, and so I'm curious about some of the creativity discussion that'll go on today. And I guess I'm also wrestling with, as probably a lot of us are, around civic discourse in this internet age, and some of the promise I think that we had around how connections would make us stronger and more understanding, more compassionate, and yet it seems in some ways to have divided us as opposed to unified us. And I know Howard's talked a lot about over the years about the internet as a public sphere. So I don't know if we'll get to that, but I hope somehow we veer off in that direction as a way to think about artists and think about connections in a really meaningful way. So thanks for having me.
Kevin is just like, he's all over this course and DS-106 with his comics and his blogging. And what I appreciate most is how his commenting on our students' blog is, first of all, it's putting me to shame, but it's really wonderful to see the interaction that he's having with his students. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate that. And so next, continuing our theme of New England, we'll go over to Jeff Javalt up in Burlington, Vermont.
Hi. So I was a longtime journalist for 33 years, mostly with newspapers. And was a juror for the Pulitzer Prize for 2 years, and started Young Writers Project because I was really frustrated with the way writing was not taught. And we've been operating what amounts to a small network of storytellers for 10 years, since 2006. And I learned something every day. And Howard, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you. I've been following you off and on for all the time that I've been in the digital space, and really appreciate your work. And so I just want to acknowledge that I too am a Ken Kesey fan.
And I so appreciate Jeff's participation so far. And I repeat myself too, like what the work he does with the Young Writers Project and the impact he has with encouraging young people to write just for the creative power of it, and the impact is just reassuring. And so happy you could be with us. And my good friend Amy Berval, who she defies explanation. She's like a creative force and just a genuine great spirit. And I know she's a big fan of Howard's.
And yours too, and Mamie's, and everybody's. No, but thank you. I'm actually working here in San Francisco, away from my Hawaiian island, where I reside usually, and just happy to be here. I went to Howard's show the other week and saw Mames, and it was just so impressive and so wonderful to hear him. And I'm excited to join this conversation about creativity, especially, but also about civic discourse, and happy to be here. I might be in and out because I'm supposed to be working. But shh, don't tell anyone.
This is work. This is work. This is real work.
Thanks.
Great. Yeah. And Amy's, she's a former, teacher, she's an educator, she's a storyteller, she's an amazing artist in her own right. Just so happy to see you, Amy.
Thank you.
And we'll go over to Alex now, one of our Kane students, representing students of all places, right, Alex?
Of course. Hi, I am Alex Grimes. I am Mia Zamora's student in her English 4060 class. If you ever logged in, you probably wouldn't see me because I'm like in the recesses of the focus of the camera. But I'm a English writing major. I'm actually taking the law enforcement chief's test as just to keep my options open in March. Big fan of art, big fan of writing. I can't imagine not having writing as an option in my life. It just is a big stress reliever, everything like that. I hope to learn something about civic discourse during this discussion. I have a lot to say, but I don't know if I will be willing to discuss certain areas of that topic, but I look forward to discussing all and everything that we do.
Great, Alex. We want to hear your voice. We definitely want to hear your voice. And then also from Kane University, we have Rashonda checking in. She just got here on time. Nice to see you, Rashonda.
Hi, yeah, I had some technical difficulties before, but I'm here. I'm a graduate student in the English and Writing Studies master's program. Another student from Professor Levine and Dr. Zamora's NetNair class. And I'm also a graduate assistant in the Writing Center. So happy to be here, excited.
How do you describe this class to your friends?
I describe it as a very wild and fun roller coaster. Every week is something different. It's really exciting, and it's opening, new pathways of my mind of creativity that I didn't even know was there. So it's really fun.
Thank you so much. And I don't know which Rheingold. I'm going to ask Howard to introduce himself. I want him to introduce Mamie because she introduced him in the video we saw, and I think we should flip that. So Howard, tell us a little bit about your esteemed self and whatever else you want to say as an introduction.
It's always been a bit of an issue to try to describe myself. I'll say that I hated school. They made me line up and put my hand over my heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance and march in single file and sit down in a desk in rows and columns. And I just started resisting then being put into a category. I realized only a couple of years ago that the forces to try to put me into a box went away a long time ago, but my daily devotion to idiosyncratic behavior continues. So, sometimes you start acting the way you act as a reaction to other people trying to make you something, and then it just goes on. But I'll have to say the most important thing is that when I was in grade school and objected to all those things that I described, I was labeled a misfit and a troublemaker. And fortunately, in my school, they sent the misfits and the troublemakers to the art room. And fortunately, the art teacher was my mom. And she, if you walked into any classroom at Madison number 2 elementary school in Phoenix, Arizona in 1959, you could literally hear a pin drop. If you walked into the art room, it was just a din of music and shouting, and there would be clay flying through the air. It was freedom. And my mom's philosophy was, we're all artists. We all need to express ourselves creatively. That's human. But at some point when we're a kid, someone looks at our drawing and says, that doesn't look like a horse. You better leave the art to the experts. And people get shut down. So to segue to Mamie, sometimes you've got a colicky baby and they cry all night and it keeps you up all night and you're cranky and they're cranky. And it's not as if that's their destiny, but the opposite. Mamie was a happy child. We brought her everywhere. She wasn't a problem. She made us happy. So you know what? I can't take credit for that. She was born that way. But I will take credit for that, and I will self-censor the way I usually say this. We didn't mess her up. And so it's so wonderful to raise a child who becomes a peer and a mentor. So I claim expertise on a bunch of things, but how do you do things within an organization? How can you get a team inspired and aligned around a goal and continue to keep them aimed at that? Mamie is the expert. It's really wonderful to be able to learn from each other. And in fact, a couple of years ago when she was working at Google, I was trying to learn programming, and I became so frustrated at trying to do that by myself. So I called Mamie and I said, why don't you quit your job and let's just learn? And to her eternal credit, she said, I was thinking the same thing. So she talked her manager into giving her a leave of absence, and we had, I think it was about 6 weeks of learning. I went to her house one day a week, and she came to my house one day a week, and we spent several hours a day at it. So it's a wonderful thing to learn with your kids and to learn from your kids. And I'll have to say the same thing is true of students. Amy was at that art show of mine, and I was very happy to see some of my former students there. I call them co-learners, and I've certainly, if you're open to it, you can learn as much from them. They know things that you don't know. They don't know that because they are propagandized to believe that you're the source of knowledge. So I'll leave it at that. I wrote books for many years. I gave talks. I taught at Berkeley and Stanford for 10 years. And now I make art most of the time. And the rest of the time, I'm a political activist, as everyone should be.
Is that all true, Mamie?
Yeah. Sound like you have a busy workload.
So welcome.
Love it. That was fun to hear you explain who I am. I really get to, I'm pretty good at introducing my dad now, but we've never flipped the table. So thanks, Alan, for doing that.
I'm devious.
I like it.
I almost want to ask, because very typically kids do things opposite than their parents. Not pure rebellion, but I know many parents and their kids really end up going into careers and even lifestyles that are rather different from their parents. And I sense some difference, but a lot of similarity. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I feel like I had a subconscious rebellion of trying to be super straight-laced and be really good at playing the game and playing by the books. And then I started in college to realize that it's more fun to kind of question the rules and start to make up your own rules. And then I realized my dad had really gotten it right the whole time. But yeah, I think high school, my rebellion was being really good at I don't know, excelling within the sort of structures that these sort of like conventional structures of society.
What can you like? I mean, it's such a broad question to like characterize what the inside Google culture is like. I mean, because they pretty much steer a lot of the culture of the internet. Maybe steer is not the right word, but I mean, they're at the center of it. And, you know, you get certain, you know, you read articles or you have this picture about what the inside is like. Can you talk any bit about what that is?
Yeah, I was there for over 9 years. So, and I would say over the course of that time, I experienced probably 3 different companies, and each one had a sort of distinct flavor, but there was always this like kind of creative, well, especially in the beginning, there was like a creative chaos to it, I would say. There was like sort of like this disorganization within the organization that I think really benefited their early days. It's kind of like that early idea space where like anything is, you know, like with creativity, it's like in the early days, you want every idea to be possible, and you kind of want that free space to pursue ideas and mess up and tinker and bump into other ideas. And so I'd say my first chapter at Google, the organization really felt like that. And even though, so I joined in 2006, and it was after it was public, and it was like a couple thousand people, but they really didn't want to think of themselves as a big company. So they really had this like distaste for the word process. There really weren't like traditional organizational structures in place. And there's like a lot of messiness that comes with that, but it's also like, so you're very alive, and it requires every individual to really like think for themselves and understand how they fit into the larger organization. And yeah, it eventually, like 4 years into my time there, they started to own the fact that they were actually like a global corporation, and maybe needed to like grow up a little bit, and put like different kinds of management structures in place. And so it's now way more like a normal place to work, I think. But there's still, especially with the old timers that are there, there's still that kind of like rebellious, playful spirit.
And Kevin's kind of getting this into the chat. I mean, this is one of the themes that me and I hope to like talk about, is kind of like pure chaos kind of is not great for us, but a lack of chaos also is stifling. And then, you know, where, you know, how in living and work do we find the right way to not just like pick a point, but we move back and forth, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of my job for the first like 6 years or so was really to figure out how do you scale that, like that creative chaos, as Google was becoming a global organization, and how can we like retain that sort of bottom up empowerment, grassroots innovation culture, but also adapt it to a company that had offices all around the world. And yeah, it was kind of this interesting balance of like the facilitating the chaos.
And maybe even for our students, Alex and Rashonda, I mean, we've thrown you into some chaos with this class. And we're going to talk about it this week, but any thoughts on that, for how it feels as a student, where you kind of, this may be like totally generalizing, when you go into class, you figure there's going to be a syllabus, and I'm going to know what I have to do, and then I'm just going to go through it. And I don't think we're doing that in our class. Do you consider it a chaotic environment?
You go ahead. I'll go second.
Well, I don't consider it to be a chaotic environment per se. I feel like it depends on how one would define chaotic to them. But I find it as a very interesting environment, and a very open and new environment that a lot of people aren't used to, because they're so used to kind of like fitting into boxes and categories and going by the books. And doing what the syllabus says and what the professor wants, but it's refreshing to have a class where you're able to kind of almost make up the rules yourself and to get into that sense of like, who am I as an artist, as a developer, as a person? And you don't always get that interaction, with your professors who are kind of presenting themselves as students as well along with you. So it's definitely refreshing. It's inspiring, to say the least. And I really enjoy it. So.
Well, thank you. And you're not just saying it to be nice to us, right?
No, I love it. I love it.
And Alex, how about you?
Yeah, please, if you hear the god-awful music they're playing in here, please don't pit that against me. But I like the openness of the class. I like that I'm able to give a level of input to Zamora. But when it comes to doing classwork, like in my experience that I've had with certain classes that kind of like leave certain aspects of the class kind of up in the air, I feel like there needs to be a little bit of structure, and not that I'm saying that you don't have that. It's just that with the assignments and everything, I wish it was a little more regulated in a sense. Just a little more, defined. It's not that I don't like the class, it's just that I wish that I knew a little more about what I was doing. But again, I'm a novice within like the realm of like technology and writing, so I assume that I'm gonna pick up a little more as time goes by. But that's just my opinion at this point.
You're definitely doing it, and someone will join in, and we're all novices, right?
Yeah. If you don't, can I jump in? Because I can remember the first class I took at UMass with Charlie Moran was his name. And he built a class similar to what you guys are doing, but not so much technology, where there really wasn't much of a syllabus that I could figure out. And it drove me crazy for like the first half of the semester, because I was so used to like courses being, here's the reading coming up and here are the assignments. And it was much more open than that. And it took me a while to figure out that I actually was learning a whole lot more because of that openness. And I think as an elementary teacher, that what I see with a lot of my students is that they're so pounded in with standardized testing and the ways things have to be right or wrong, that creative spirit, which we see among us here, right, seems requires a whole lot drawing out, and they're not used to that, which is really too bad in a lot of ways. And I think part of all educators' role is to try to draw out that creative spirit in as many students as we can.
I feel like you're being better. Oh, sorry. I was just to say, for me, like, it seems like you're being better prepared for life, really. Like I just left my job. This is the first time in my life where I don't have a job and I don't know what's next. And there isn't, right? I don't have a syllabus. Like there's nothing telling me what to go do next and what do I need to do to succeed and like what is the next path I need to take. It's really all on me to figure that out. And the fact that you're already getting to like practice those tools for sort of understanding what's next or what's needed or how you can contribute. That's like such an essential muscle, I think, for living a fulfilled life.
With a little bit of risk, right?
Yeah. A bit about self-empowerment, right? To not prescribe learning outcomes, but, to dare our students to imagine what they want to learn. I think that's a kind of novel, unfortunately, a profoundly novel experience in formal education, no?
So true.
Well, I feel.
Go ahead, Alex, speak.
Well, I feel that there definitely needs to be a framework, like a certain authoritative structure for children. Like, what's his name? Kevin, you said you teach 6th grade, right? I feel that kids need to come into the world knowing that there is a certain kind of set of rules that they need to go by. Not that, like, everybody needs to, like, certain authoritative rules, but, like, as you get older, like, it's kind of ingrained to you over a certain period of time. And I definitely feel that in college, that there's a little bit of, there should be a greater degree of freedom in what we do, because I feel that we know how we should operate in the world. We know how we should like operate like in the presence of our elders, like of our superiors. But that's just all I have to say.
That's good. That's
I think Jude has a comment here, being an 11-year-old who's experienced it firsthand.
Well, thing is, with the creative chaos, it's kind of extreme chaos back in my old school, because they are like the old-fashioned like structured, do this, here's a packet, finish this by this time, no exceptions, and there's no really kind of like thinking and what, because the only creative class probably there is either like music or art, but those aren't as creative because you have boundaries and you have to do this or it's not the way it's supposed to be. And I think it's really, really difficult for like some kid to like be creative in that space where it's so monitored and like has a lot of boundaries. So that's just my opinion on.
I feel that over the course of my school experience, I feel like classes, like how we're supposed to operate, like in terms of assignments, have become a little bit not so structured. Because when I started college, when I was in Union County College, we definitely operated off the syllabi that we received. Like everything was absolute, like we followed the code. But up to this point in my life where I'm going to college, like most recently, a lot of classes that I've had, there's like a lot of uncertainty. Like, we'll come to that assignment when it comes up. It's like, I don't know what to expect, what's going to come next. And of course, that's like a very relative idea that comes with like operating in the world, being independent. But I just feel within the context of school, not in real life, that's something that definitely shouldn't lack within like a certain kind of structure. Like things should be definite. Like we shouldn't just wait until like a certain time to like inform yourself and then inform the student. And I'm not speaking out against you, Professor Zamora. Like you have the weekly assignments already done like by a certain time and expect us to do it by a certain time. I'm just saying with certain teachers and certain classes.
Okay. Well, it's great to hear both Jude and Alex kind of talk about the structure of school, and I want to. Howard's raising his hand, and we definitely want to hear him talk. But it's also like embedded in this larger, especially now, this context of uncertainty and confusion in the world, and so that's kind of an interesting dynamic where we have to sort of deal with everything going on outside, at the same time feeling this tension inside of our institutions. So we're looking for the wisdom of Howard to save us.
Well, no, I just wanted to say that uncertainty, confusion, and chaos that's kind of the natural background noise of the world, and making sense of it is maybe the most important thing that we need to do. And schooling projects this illusion of control and order and syllabus. And I understand that kind of vertigo that comes along with, okay, I don't see what the plan for learning here is, but I really I really resonated with what George Siemens said about the first MOOC, which is, it's not about following all of this material and slotting it into your understanding of what you need to know. It's about trying to make sense of the chaos. You will learn things better than if they were presented to you and you were tested on it, if you try to make sense of it yourself. B, try to make sense of things that seem chaotic. That's a skill that you need to practice, and to practice with others. So, a group of students can get together and say, I don't understand what's going on here. Let's figure it out. To me, that is risky, but the outcome is so much more worth it then okay, sit down, shut up, listen for what's going to be on the test, and tick off the pieces of knowledge that you're supposed to take away from this class. I think that we're operating under this huge misunderstanding of the role in which learning plays in education. Of course, with the other panelists here, I'm preaching to the converted. These are all people who know that, who cut their students loose and know that, yeah, it's scary to give your students power and to shut up a little bit, but 99 times out of 100, it pays off.
I probably everybody's having some of these like back channel conversations with people now of like what's happening, what are we doing right now, how do we maintain. I have people talking about not sleeping. A friend of mine I'm just talking to who works in organizations says it's all of a sudden uncomfortable to sort of go and do the ordinary task of the job every day with this kind of sense of uncertainty about the world. And I'd like to hear anybody kind of talk about either how they're dealing with it, or if it can be dealt with, or how we not quietly go insane, if that's not too big a question.
Well, it seems like more than ever, we need to make sure that we're not in these silos that we're in. And we're in one right now, right? I mean, Howard just pointed out that we look around here, and I bet you for the most part, we have similar trajectories on our views of the world. And, somehow we need to go back to thinking about the potential and the possibilities of the connected learning, or the web, or whatever we want to call it, right? As to kind of understand each other a little more than we have. And for me, it's thinking less of who's at the top and more the people like me here in the middle, and trying to figure out ways to make those connections. And I don't have the answers to that, but it's definitely something that I think we all need to be thinking about more. To understand different viewpoints, so we don't all get stuck in these corners that we can't get out of.
So if I could just jump in, I think there are a couple of things that we're noticing. One is that the kids are really finding satisfaction out of venting and ranting, which we love to let them do. And they're actually a lot more politically oriented than they were when we began Young Writers Project 10 years ago, which is kind of interesting. And we really appreciate that. And we're also, Alan, we're looking to see if we can get kids to maybe focus a little closer in and to look at what they, in a sense, what they can control or understand, like the world immediately around them. And the humor and of course the kids we work with is being in love and not being in love, which has its own cycle. But just to get them to write about, what they are trying to understand just around their neighborhood or street. And just very quickly, Mia and Ellen know I was in New Jersey as part of an ongoing project with teachers and students in Newark, New Jersey. And we had them write about their house or their street or just their immediate neighborhood. And it was pretty astonishing to see how they got uncorked, again, in an environment of non-judgment where teachers were writing right alongside of kids. They were critiquing each other's work. And it was really amazing. And so after the first draft, when we did, after we had done some exercise and had them do first drafts, to see, what do you think of that kid? So one kid raised her hand and she said, I feel like I've finally gotten it all out. Which I thought was just an amazing thing for I think she was 7th grader to be talking about. So I think we should be mindful of how much is getting pent up in kids now because of all of the networks to information way, way, way outside their immediate neighborhood, and that some solace can be found by bringing them a little bit closer to home. to kind of really understand what's happening right there. Didn't mean to shut everybody up.
No.
Well, I was wondering, Jeff, when you were talking initially about your wonderful space and the ability to allow students to write about what they're feeling. Are you getting both sides of the political spectrum there? And I asked that question because as somebody kind of watching the Letters to the President project unfold in the fall, I feel like it was overwhelmingly more left-leaning than right-leaning. And I wondered whose voices were being silenced or not invited in. So I'm just curious about how your organization kind of thinks about that.
We think about it a lot, and it's funny. I really got called to task by some kids because the first time we put up Donald Trump, what do you think of all this? Before he, as he was gaining in the Republican primaries, I put a picture of Donald yelling, which seemed to me pretty accurate for what I see most of the time. And a couple of kids really called me out on it. And they just said, hey, if you really follow what you say, which is you respect all views, then you need to put a picture out there that is not representative of what you believe. So we replaced it with a nice portrait of Donald. And we did get very different responses, or we got a much wider variety of responses. We do think about that since we are living in the bubble state of Vermont, which, if you will recall, produced the only socialist senator. So we have to be careful of that, and I do feel like the overwhelming response has been kids really upset. And so we're trying to figure out ways that we're working with some teachers to try to get some more of those counter voices in.
The chat crowd is asking, they're going, Howard.
Yes, absolutely.
When I started writing about what I called virtual community in 1986, 1987, I sat down and I thought, well, what's the most important implication of this? There's a relatively small number of people are really enjoying this ability to connect with other people who share an interest, but who we never knew before, who may be on the other side of the world, and to have conversations and even arguments. And to me, the answer was, well, if everybody does this, are we going to become more free or less free? What's the effect going to be on democracy? And that led me to something I had not known about, which is the theory of the public sphere. And the idea behind the theory of the public sphere is that democracy is not just about voting for your leaders. It's about having a population who are relatively well informed and relatively free to speak to one another, who can form public opinion, and public opinion can then influence policy. Examples of that might be women didn't used to vote. They weren't given the vote. They took the vote by pushing their way into the public sphere, by forming public opinion, by marching, by talking, by writing. This is a civil rights movement as well. I'm not arguing that America is a place where the public sphere is particularly healthy, but it is a place in which a lot of what plays out has to do with public opinion. So now we've got this gigantic cacophony of voices. Is the public sphere any healthier than it used to be? And I'm gonna punt on that question because it would take the rest of our time to talk about. But I think what's really important for students is to get in there and to begin exercising a public voice. Facebook lets you put up pictures of your friends within Facebook's parameters. And Twitter is great. I use Twitter all day long. as long as you use your 140 characters. You can, as I learned from Alan and Jim Groom, you can require your students to acquire a domain name and a slice of server and install their own WordPress blog and learn to be a publisher and begin to make their voice heard. Whether 20 people or 20,000 people pay attention to you, the important thing is agency and participation. You are not just one of the millions of people who are fed what a few people create for you. You are in some way a creator of culture. That does not always move the giant ship of state. Sometimes it does. I'm reminded of the woman whose name I forget at the moment, it will come back to me, who is obsessed with the Diebold company's voting machines. They make most of the voting machines in America and most of the voting machines in the world, and they don't reveal their source code. So nobody knows whether they're rigged or not. And this woman, she had maybe 20 people read her blog, but she obsessively combed through the Diebold website, and one day she found the source code unprotected. She copied it. She put it on her server. Bloggers who had more than 20 people, bloggers who had 20 million people began to pick it up. Some students at Swarthmore put it on a server at Swarthmore. Diebold sued them, and federal court found in their favor. So here's an opportunity here that, you know, someone who didn't have much of a voice exercised her voice, and it moved the needle. And I think the important part is not so much moving the needle, but what's the percentage of people who have been trained to digest whatever is fed to them, whether it is true or not, and people who've had some experience with agency, with voice, with creating culture, as well as consuming it. And I think that that's maybe the thread that connects all of the different educators here, is that we encourage students to exercise their voice in different ways. Will the public sphere can be healthy in the future? I think it depends on two things. It depends on some percentage of the population feeling that they have agency and having some experience having a voice. And it also consists of how many people can separate the bad info from the good info, what I call crap detection, what used to be called critical thinking. It's still called critical thinking, but many people feel that it's a communist plot to teach your students and your kids to question authority. If you don't question the authority of the information that's being fed to you, you're going to be in a lot of trouble in the future. It's not just being misled politically. You could die. Who doesn't Google their symptoms? There's a lot of bad medical advice out there. Fortunately, it's not rocket science. It's just that it's not really taught.
All right, Sandy, you asked to hear from Howard. Now, now come back, right?
No, but I definitely agree with you, Howard. I believe that exercising your voice is like the primary factor of democracy that needs to be done. I just feel that people exercise their voice in a somewhat ignorant fashion. I feel that people try to convey their idea. Excuse me, who is there a child on one of Okay. I just feel that people just love to showboat. There's some ignorant idealism out there. I just feel like if I go on Facebook or somebody's talking politics but doesn't even know politics, I don't pretend to be somebody who's like all high and mighty within that realm. But people like to showboat. People like to just dish out ideals that don't work. When I see all the collective amounts of people on the news, and I do feel that news is a bit biased in today's society. I see all the gatherings, like when Bernie Sanders was running, like people were preaching for entitlement, but they were voting for Bernie Sanders for the concept of getting free stuff. I just don't think they understand how our society runs, what economics is to begin with. But When you have a voice, it can be used wrongly just as well. There's power in numbers, but those numbers aren't always right. The morale, the idealism that they're backing isn't always necessarily right. Certainly isn't always right. I just feel that people have to be well enough informed before they go out and talk against people, before they advocate for something. Sometimes when I turn on the TV, when I hear a news report, it's just very hard to pay attention. It's just very hard for me not to just wave my hand and say, enough said right there. I believe in democracy, but just not some of the people that enforce it.
So I was almost thinking, are people ignorant of their own ignorances then? You know, because I mean, you're somewhat suggesting that people aren't informed, but maybe people are informed. Like, how do we know who's informed? This is all this question about like people now trying to define what is true and what is not. And it's like, it was never done by authority. It's kind of done by consensus, right?
That is true. Like I say, I just want to speak my mind regarding the topic. I don't want to start a big backlash of like conversation between everybody, but I'm definitely open to people's opinions. I want to hear people out, but I need to know when to stop people from talking because sometimes they just don't know what they're saying.
Well said, Alex. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in one more time here with a little thing. I used to teach digital journalism to students, and I taught the Lippmann-Dewey debate. 100 years ago, a young media superstar, i.e., a reporter for the New York Times, wrote a book called Public Opinion. That was Walter Lippmann. And in Public Opinion, he noted that America at the beginning of the 20th century was moving into this complex industrial civilization, and Americans are not equipped to govern in that situation. Americans are ignorant and easily misled. And Dewey, much older philosopher at Columbia University, educator, he said, well, if Americans are ignorant, we need better public education. And if they are easily misled, we need better journalism. So I would ask my students, I would divide them in half, and I would have them argue each case and then switch sides and argue. And then I would ask, okay, if you had to bet your right hand, would you go with Lippmann, Americans are ignorant, we need some experts to govern us? Or Dewey, we just need better institutions to raise the citizens up to the level where they can govern themselves? And I'll have to say that my heart is always with Dewey, but I would not bet my right hand that Walter Lippmann is wrong. And that was 100 years ago. So this is not new.
I've been thinking about that a lot, especially because I come from the world of like technology making, and I feel like we've all inherited these tools and technologies that give us these abilities, but we're not inheriting a way to think about them or question them or understand how to use them. And I think I took that for granted because I grew up with my dad, who taught me how to question the information that I received online or the people that I connected with online, and to like, if I was reading Wikipedia, to go to the source documents and, you know, like sort of trace all the trails of information and start to form my own mental model for like, what's the information I'm getting here. And so as a technology creator, I'm starting to feel that we have a responsibility to not only build the tools, but also to help build like the education or literacy around those tools, so that people who are using them are not doing so blindly and are not doing it without questioning or understanding what they are and where. Yeah, what, does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah. And it seems like there's also like I think you guys are creating this culture of questioning and empowering people to think for themselves and engage in these kinds of conversations, and that there's like a cultural and societal component to that. But then there also are all these opportunities for technology to be stepping up too. Like, is there a way for when you're sharing something online, is there a way for the technology to help identify when there are wrong, not factual information in there, or personal biases that are being expressed? And I don't know, is there a way for the technology itself to sort of illuminate those discrepancies or biases so that we can have a better public discourse?
I think philosophy in schools is quite important. I used to teach a philosophy course. Well, it's called Theory of Knowledge. And I think that got students to deconstruct the things they were seeing and reading, not just reading, but, images and whatever, and we applied that to our studies in history as well, looking at personal accounts. So I think this metacognition of thinking about thinking, if we brought philosophy into every course on that sort of level, would be really helpful as a tool for students to be aware.
Some might argue that when that's technologized, that there's inherently some human bias that ends up in that, and then in this meta circle, like this, is the technology like influencing us, and are we aware of some of these biases when we do something that we think is democratic, and then we realize somehow, hopefully, maybe not always, that actually we've made a huge misunderstanding that we are cutting out.
I'd say it depends on how technology conveys the message. I mean, within the realm of writing, there's it's not very easy to distinguish the context in which you're talking, if you're sending a message, but it's not very easy to convey tone. And Amy Burvell is writing in the chat on the side here, I do like how she mentions we are emotional creatures, and that is in itself a bias. I mean, when you incorporate bias, you're incorporating your own mentality. You're incorporating your own way of thinking. It's very hard to take yourself out of the equation when you're talking about any given topic. I mean, Zamora, you have a son, and imagine if your son's well-being was incorporated into a situation where you had to make a big decision. It's not easy to separate the facts from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, certainly. And, I think I have a foreboding feeling, like all parents, I think, about, what kinds of skills are needed to move forward in this world as it's sort of unfolding right in front of us. As Howard said, these days, it's almost required to be a 24/7 activist in order to meet the world and sort of engage in it in ways that are both rich and empowering and productive, right? So a kind of, Alex, you said, what if you're, in a theoretical sense, what if? I'll be honest with you, and I'm saying this publicly now, I took my child out of institutionalized school and I'm experimenting with his own education, which is to me the most precious thing that anyone will receive, because I think what we're asking and what we're thinking about is at the center of my concerns moving forward as a parent and as an intellectual. So, and I'm not quite sure what pathway is the right one, and what roads are the right one for giving him and his brother, his little brother, a kind of set of skills to meet the world in a way that will ensure that they're at peace and happy, and also have a sense of self in a solid way when they become young adults. Yeah, so I really appreciate your prompt in a way, Alex, because it gets at the heart of everything we're talking about. I was kind of hoping we could take a brief turn, because we're running out of time, to the issue of creativity, which I know is at the heart of what Howard can contribute here in terms of thinking about what it means to be a creative person, what it means to be mindful in the 20th century when we're facing both the positive but also negative effects of the network in our lives. So maybe we can generate a conversation. My brain is popping in different directions, but at one point in time we were talking about consumers versus makers and producers online. And there's a little quote that my husband always says to Jude here when he's concerned that maybe he's been on his video game too long, and he says, "Hey buddy, you're consuming other people's dreams.
Oh,
So I'm throwing that out as a thought bone for someone to chew on. I'm interested in what people think about the role that creativity has in this day and age, in being a person at peace, a productive person, a person who can contribute to the world in positive ways.
If I could just piggyback on that a little bit, I've asked a question here earlier. I'll type it back in, and Howard kindly gave me a link, which I've already read. But it's the whole question of storytelling and art making comes from where we dream. And you did write about that eloquently, but I thought in this particular setting, we'd also like to hear a little bit more about how you're using the dream state. And I see that also, like many of our generation, psychedelics were an early opening of the veil between worlds. And I'm guessing that it's stayed with you for your entire life. It seems like it from what I see. I'd just like to hear more about that dream state and art.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes, so there's only so much of that I can tackle. But way back in the beginning, I talked about my mother's philosophy that we all have a need to express ourselves creatively, and people who feel like they need to draw a dog that looks like a dog and therefore refrain from doodling or playing with clay or whatever it is, they're really starving part of their mind that's important to all of us. You have to learn to trust your intuitive process, and it's not like there's a book you can read to do it. It's about messing with things and seeing what happens. And a story that I recently understood about my own process is that about 15 or 20 years ago, I started painting spider webs on canvas. I'll skip the part about how I got started doing that, but for some reason it was pleasurable. I did it for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks. And I built up layers of white painted spider web on canvas so that the actual painting was about 3/4 of an inch off the canvas. And then they sat in my closet for 20 years. Recently, they've got these marvelous Arduino microcontrollers and very bright LED lights. And you know, painting is reflected light. Pigment reflects light, and LEDs, the radiated light. And we really haven't, we artists, creators, have not had the ability to combine the two technically until recently. It occurred to me, oh, if I could build a frame and put colored lights in it, then people would be able to see these spider webs as a kind of a multi-dimensional painting. Did I understand that when I painted it? No, but I just trusted this instinct that told me painting spider webs is fun. It's okay. Go ahead and do it. And then, because I've had years of trusting that process, when the ability to really make something of that, to move to the next step, came along, I recognized it. And I think that comes, you know, we're so used to, you've got to start something and finish something and have this finished product that you can show the world. I'm a gardener. I really think about it as the compost heap. You know, you gotta keep taking stuff and mixing it together and unconsciously let it combine. Alchemy. Alchemy has to do with not only the transformation of materials, but the transformation of the alchemist. Messing with the materials is really the external tool that may or may not result in an artifact that you show to people. But the result of it is that you've trained your intuition. So what most of the world has seen from me are the things that I've written about technology and the future. And I don't think that I would have been able to just use a rational, scientific, scholarly approach and have the degree of accuracy that I did as a forecaster if I didn't have this intuition that helped me make sense of the signals that you can find through rational means. So I'll leave it at that.
I think we want to maybe leave it at that, but we're definitely not speechless. I think we're applauding here, and thank you so much for that. And everybody else for there's not nearly enough time to have all this.
Not nearly enough time.
But if anybody wants to stick around, Google gives me 7 more hours, but I don't think anybody wants to do that.
My brain's like ginger ale. It's fizzing, 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 fizzing.
The last bit was intriguing.
Yeah, it really was.
I'm ready for you to read your blog on that, Jude. Okay.
I enjoyed hearing everybody's opinions, and maybe I'll see you again in the future on one of these blog posts.
Cool.
On one of these videos.
Thank you, Alex. Awesome to have you here. And especially thank you to Howard and Mamie for coming in from both sides of the country to
Yeah.
put a little Rheingold rainbow across the USA.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. We
Thank you for having us.
Oh, Howard, fantastic shoe shot.
Show us the book. Where's the book?
Yeah, send a link to your work.
Okay, bye, folks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.